Hello, Russell. It's Minya. In the next couple of minutes, I'm going to talk about my portfolios. I'm going to take you step by step through my portfolio and then evaluate my reflections, the organization, and what I've learned about from doing this portfolio. So let's start here simply with the cover page. Aminia's e-portfolio. Well, maybe depending for who is the audience, I might of course use my last name, making it maybe a little bit tighter. Whether I would choose this image again, depending on the audience, I'm not sure. I just like that image because just a couple of months ago I was in Jerusalem and there this image was taken, so it reminded me of the experience I had. Also, using this background is basically because I'm teaching on Lake Geneva. I thought the little subtle waves were a nice way to allude to that. Of course, this is a quick description of why this e-portfolio was created. Let's look at my profile. Again, it's this idea of the lake, just a little different. Here, another image. I might it's also a recent picture. I probably would choose a different one depending if it's for students or not, or who is again the target group. I chose French simply because I'm teaching in the French-speaking part of Switzerland. But this is a question I would, think a little bit more about it in the future. Do I want to create a multilingual e-portfolio, or do I want to keep it all either English, French, or German? But that might also depend again on the target group. Can they actually everyone understand the specific or given language? Here are my reflections, and in the middle I talk a little bit more in detail about them. Let's move on to Google Docs. This was one of the documents that we used to write about why it would be useful for the students to collaborate with each other. And of course, it's nice to see then all the different our students are in our group working together and putting in their 2 cents. So this was quite interesting. And I think it's going to be quite a useful task to do for my students actually on almost every level. Here we are on the Google Forms page, and you probably also notice on the Google Docs and later on the Google Slides, here this background is a little bit different. I wanted to shift more the thinking, more the action part, of what's happening right now. The Google form and the questionnaires that I developed, this was actually a great idea. The questionnaire as well as the quiz, because it made me realize I should use these type of questionnaires much earlier during in the beginning of a class to kind of say, okay, rather than asking in the plenum, I can ask them directly online with such a questionnaire, what they know, what they don't know, what they would like to know, and then really tailor my course around that. And sometimes when you don't do that in the plenum, in the class, there might be some who will be either more open, more talkative. So I hope I'll get better feedback from there. And of course, to have different ways to make quizzes is always good. So that was also nice and it worked quite well. Let's look at the Google Slides. Yeah, here I am. And I still, I still don't know why that, I can only see you and me. I'm wondering now whether you can see it, although I just added myself to the other segment. So maybe I will try to give you access to it in case there is some issue, because the original one was this one that I copied and tried to do very much in the beginning. I'm sure we can figure it out. So that's but also the slides, nice to have this visual, the combination, the collaboration among the students in theory. But as one can see, technology, you have to be careful. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't, well, you learn from it. Now I'm back at the reflections. Obviously, I didn't open up the YouTube reflection page because I haven't put anything in there. When I look at my reflections, well, one thing is clear, especially in the first unit. I was just at the beginning on kind of warming up to the subject to think about it, and I think one of the feedbacks that you gave me was really look a little bit more deeper into this idea of assessment. And I would very much agree. I like the way you try to interlink assessment, learning, whether it's outside of the class, inside of the class, and activity, basically making it a coherent whole where it's almost impossible to distinguish between where does learning and assessment take place, because it's probably or ideally overlapping. In general, about my reflections, I think I tried very much to make it sometimes very concrete about what I would do teaching, as well as a little bit abstract, taking a little step back when I look at all of that. I can also clearly say that sometimes when the assignments were very concrete, it was great because I put it immediately into action, made me help to remember, and sometimes with the more reflective, thoughtful part, those parts of the assignment, I also realized, I probably could have pushed myself a little bit harder, and I think I did mention that, especially this past week was a very intense week for me, and I would have less time. Not to excuse myself completely, but I think it was a great way for me to experience how also my students sometimes feel that, yes, we like to learn more, to put in a bit more time or effort, and sometimes you have to see how can I balance it. And I think just being put in this position again taught me a lot about it. But I think in every different unit helped me to access this whole concept of the flipped learning, the evaluation assessment part of it in a slightly different way. So I think now looking back at it, it creates a nice coherent whole, which I like. Okay, question 3 was the evaluation of my of the organization of my e-portfolio. I think it's well organized, it's clear, it's not overloaded. Could I add additional slides? Probably. I think definitely I will add a video page to it, and maybe a link to a CV or other things that might be of interest. But I think it depends a little bit, again, for what is the purpose of a specific portfolio. Question 4, what have I learned from doing the portfolio? Of course, a lot. No, it's actually true. I have learned a lot because now I actually know how to do a portfolio. Also, I think creating my own e-portfolio or several e-portfolios maybe will still be a challenge because, of course, having all your tasks and the little link here and click there made it easier to quickly come to the area where I needed to be. I've also learned a lot in the practical part. I often think also, I think theory is very important, but sometimes, especially when I have more time, I can actually go and read it by myself. But sometimes to hear you in those videos talk about a couple of tools and the advantages and disadvantages really very quickly cuts through it and makes it quicker and more accessible. So that is great. I certainly will try to do that with my students, probably not with all of them. I will carefully have to assess for which class. Because I think already I mentioned we do have a portfolio, but that's a more traditional European um, portfolio. I think this is probably it. I'm pretty sure 10 minutes is probably also long enough for you. So again, this was a good experience. And by the way, Unit 5, I did watch the first videos, and I also watched the second set of videos of Unit 5, and I do have to agree they're much better. So thank you for the course. It was a pleasure, and keep me posted if you have another one. Tschüss.